I'm not going to be using a timeline right now, though we can use that later on. And I'm going to open up another item from the faculty folder or from Canvas. So we'll go to Open, and we'll see what we've got here. We got Stock Photo Guy. Yeah, let's Stock Photo Guy. That'll work. So you can tell this is a stock photo because it's got watermarks all over it. We don't really care about that for the purpose of this exercise. So I'll hit W, the quick selection tool. So I'm going to use the magic wand tool, and tolerance 32. It's probably going to select too much with a tolerance of 32, but let's see what we got. And I'm going to click in a white area of the image. And so I'm going to make it editable by double-clicking on the name. So I'll zoom in here, Control plus. I'm going to hit Q again and just add the t-shirt by using the brush tool. There we go. I'm not really too worried about the quality of the results at this point, because all we're wanting is a figure that can be used to create a puppet warp. We're going to make this guy waving. We could have him waving and dancing. So there we go. We'll pull this down here, and I think that's probably as good as we need it. So I'll hit Q again, and then just hit delete. Now we've got our figure against a transparent background, which is what Puppet Warp wants. Puppet Warp doesn't like working with images with backgrounds. It wants some cutout. I mean, you can do it with images with background, it's just not going to be as good. Let's go now to Edit Puppet Warp and just click on that. So what happens now is that the visible parts of your image, or this particular layer anyway, are covered with a triangular mesh. And you can see the mesh is a little bit finer resolution towards the edges of the selection. In general, it's a pretty coarse mesh. We've got some options. We could certainly edit this. We could make the mesh a little finer if we wanted. And we'll look at how to do that in a moment. But for right now, let's just see what we can do with Puppet Warp. Here we are. Here are our controls up on the top. Density is normal. This is fewer points, so bigger mesh. This is more points, so denser mesh. Let's have it a denser mesh. It's not really that dense. And expansion 2 pixels. It's just the amount it's going beyond the actual edges. Show the mesh. Okay, we can hide the mesh if we want. So now, when I go over the image, you can see there's a little push pin with a plus sign next to it. And this is basically what it looks like. It's as if you had this figure printed on a sheet of rubber, on a cork board, and you were pinning it. You were fixing certain parts of the figure by putting push pins in them. So I'm going to put a push pin at the end of this arm. And then I'm going to put one at the elbow. And then I accidentally put one here. Just hit delete if it's selected. Okay, now we're back to adding pins. So I'm adding pins roughly where the joints would be in the actual figure. And maybe put one on top of his head, his neck, his navel, ankles, end of the feet. Yeah, that's probably good. Right. There we go. We can move them. I can click and drag on the push pin to move the figure around. If I have more than one selected, by holding down Shift, I can hover over either of them and I can move them as a group. Though you'll notice there's a little bit of distortion within it because it's rubber. This is not a true puppet. This is a rubber puppet. But you can do some entertaining and interesting things. I'm going to add a couple more pins to the knees. But you'll notice all of this is static. There is no way, as far as I'm aware, to actually animate a puppet warp. You can do it in things like Flash, which we'll be looking at towards the end of the semester, but you can't do it in Photoshop. What you can do, however, is you can make a series of images. So you make a series of images which differ from each other by a very small amount. So let's just do that. This is layer 0. I'm going to drag layer 0 down to the little plus sign at the bottom here. Oh, and we need to apply that warp before we do anything. So I'll go back here, apply the puppet warp, apply, and then drag it down here. Now we've got layer 0 copy. We got to make our puppet warp again. Edit, puppet warp. There it is. I'm just going to move this arm this time. 1 pin, 2 pin, 3 pin. Hover my cursor over this end pin, move it, oh. And you'll see this is part of the disadvantage of puppet warp. Because unless you have all of the outside of the figure pinned, then you're going to get any kind of movement in one part of the figure being propagated through to the rest. So I need a couple more pins, maybe one here, one here, one here, one here, and we'll see what that does. Right, now let's try moving his arm again. A little better. So now I've got a second frame of my animation. And I hit the move tool. Do I want to apply the puppet warp? Apply. All right, let's do that again. Layer 0 copy, drag down here, edit, puppet warp, pin, 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 pin. Hover over the end pin and drag again. And now you can see we're getting a whole bunch of different frames for our animation. And if we show these for a short time each, then, and hide the other ones, then we'll get an animation of our figure. We get a puppet warp, rubbery animation of the figure that we want. Better, though, is to actually open something like the trees or the seaweed. Seaweed is good if you want a background for an underwater scene with waving seaweed fronds in the tide, then this is quite a good way to do it. Let's open Warped Tree Photoshop. And here you can see I've got 5 layers, all of which are slightly different. I can use these in combination in a timeline or in a frame animation to show a tree waving to the right and then waving back again to the neutral position in the center. So nice way to warp things, a nice way to apply an interesting, slightly different way to animate a photograph, but it does tend to be a bit labor intensive. Okay, that's enough about puppet warp, I think, for today.